Welcome back to Simplifying the State, the podcast where we break down politics so you don't have to try and figure out why Putin is in Alaska. As always, I'm Adam Watson.
And I'm Nicholas Perrin.
All right, now before we start, if you would be so kind as to rate and follow us wherever you are listening to this, and make sure to share with a friend or maybe just some random person on the street. Think of it as a great way to make new friends. All right, so the big story last Friday was the summit between Putin and Trump in Anchorage, Alaska, where Trump rolled out the red carpet literally and figuratively. Unfortunately, not much came from that meeting. There was no announcement of a ceasefire or of future meetings or of any movement on a peace deal. Trump said after the meeting between him and Putin in Alaska that he was going to try and arrange a trilateral meeting between Putin, Zelensky, and himself. But before we get into the specifics of what came from that meeting and what happened in the subsequent meeting on Monday, Nicholas, do you kind of just want to give us a breakdown of where the war is right now?
Yeah, I can do that. Okay, so for the past about a year, the front lines in Ukraine have not changed very much. From the beginning of the war and Ukraine's counteroffensive in the north and their incursion into Kursk, those were like the three major developments on the front line that really took the world by surprise. But now really nothing has happened in the past many months. And Russia has been slowly advancing along the front lines, although it has been fairly costly for them in terms of equipment and manpower. It's no Bakhmut, but it is still very costly for Russia. And Ukraine isn't doing too well equipment-wise either. They're getting a lot of modern equipment from NATO countries and the US, but it's not exactly enough. Like, just in terms of Patriot systems, for example, Ukraine has I think 5 Patriot systems around there, which, if you don't know, are like anti-air systems. They help with taking down missiles. Ukraine has stated that they need at least 25 to properly defend their airspace. So it's not going too well for them on that front, but it can't really go too well because there are, I think, less than 25 Patriot systems in the world. Can't do a whole lot about that. And yeah, they're getting some howitzers from Germany, a lot of tanks from other NATO countries, which is helping with their stockpiles, but it's not really enough because they're also facing some manpower shortages with reserve units. And they don't want to push this conscription age down because that would not be popular at all. And that would take more hands off the production front, which are desperately needed because they're running out of equipment, especially ammunition, fast. So neither country really wants to fight anymore. And Trump definitely doesn't want them to fight anymore either. And so that brings us to Alaska.
Yeah, so the two leaders, they met in Anchorage, and it was based on the substance that was discussed. It seems to be mostly a symbolic meeting. There was a lot of fanfare. There was quite literally a red carpet. There was a military flyover, including a B-2 Spirit, a couple F-22s, a couple F-35s, I believe. Kind of a show of strength from the United States. But there wasn't really anything much of substance that came from the meeting. Like I said before, there was no agreement on a ceasefire like Trump had hoped to get. There was really no major progress on a peace deal. Shortly after the meeting took place, the New York Times reported that after talks in Alaska, Trump would support a plan to cede the Donbass region to Russia. Russia currently controls around 88% of the Donbass region. The U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff also said that Putin agreed that the U.S. could provide NATO-like protection to Ukraine. President Zelensky, in response to this, hailed and welcomed the United States pledge to provide security guarantees. Zelensky ultimately rejected territorial concessions. Putin also reportedly offered to end the entire war if Ukraine ceded all of Donbass to Russia, but I doubt Ukraine will do this without significant either diplomatic pressure from of all the people supporting it, or a major turning point in the war in Russia's favor. But if a major turning point were to happen, then I assume that would not be enough for Putin, and then he would then press for more. So I wouldn't see that happening. So on August 18th, though, Trump, Zelensky, along with other leaders from across Europe, including the United Kingdom, Finland, France, Italy, the NATO Secretary General, etc., convened at the White House to discuss the aftermath. So they discussed a multitude of things, one of which were security guarantees that were previously mentioned that are kind of akin to Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty. Anyone not aware of the Article 5, it's the kind of binding part of the NATO alliance. It basically means an attack against one is an attack against all, the main thing behind NATO. So after the meeting on Fox News, Trump said when it comes to security, the Europeans are willing to put people on the ground. We're willing to help them with things, especially probably by air. He did rule out putting U.S. boots on the ground, but like that interview quote said, he has not ruled out and has hinted and suggested that the U.S. would take a more supportive role in terms of air power. He did not specify what that could look like, so that could be anything ranging from air transport for European troops to U.S. fighter jets enforcing a no-fly zone over Ukraine. So it really depends on what he decides. The group also discussed the previous Ukrainian and European prerequisite that a ceasefire would need to be in place before peace negotiations could begin. Zelensky seems to have kind of dropped this requirement for the peace deal, so that could possibly help speed things along. Like I said, Trump hinted at a future trilateral meeting between him, Putin, and Zelensky. However, the Kremlin said that the agenda is not really set for that. Zelensky has said that the Russians are going to try to stretch this whole thing out as long as possible. So it seems like that we are not really close to that, barring any kind of major change. Trump said that sanctions are possibly on the table if there is no major progress within 2 weeks, although he had previously said that before the Alaska meeting. The deadline came and went. There were no additional sanctions or tariffs placed on Russia. So, we'll see if this time it's different. But yeah, overall, there were major developments, but no major progress is what I would categorize the sort of 4 days of those meetings and such. What do you think, Nicholas?
Yeah, a lot of this and just diplomacy surrounding Ukraine nowadays, especially if it's peace talks, has just been really nothing. I'm not really sure if that'll change, but there's potential for it. I mean, if NATO, with NATO's new spending targets, if they follow through and do deliver more equipment to Ukraine, then it might cause Russia to come to the negotiating table a little more moderate. I heard that Trump was mimicking some points that Putin had made during the meeting. What do you think about that, Adam?
I'm not familiar with that. What points are you talking about?
He started saying things like Crimea, is Russia. There's no chance that it can be Ukrainian.
Oh, yeah.
That Ukraine cannot join NATO.
Yeah. So basically, a couple members of the Trump administration, and now I guess Trump, said that they believe two things are off the table. One is Ukraine joining NATO, which is, I suppose, why they're pitching these security guarantees akin to Article 5, but specifically not Ukraine joining NATO. And then the second one is Trump, amongst other officials, ruled out the possibility of Crimea returning to Ukraine. And that's obviously something Vladimir Zelensky wants. Talking to the equipment thing very quickly, because we don't want to make this whole thing like an hour long, but it's not just kind of an equipment issue, it's also kind of a manpower issue, because the Russians have a much larger population than Ukraine, and Ukraine is kind of running out of manpower. Obviously, they could up their conscription levels, but the issue is that once you do that, it'll have severe long-term negative effects on their population that can actually work and contribute to their economy. So right now, they're kind of in a place where they're putting as many people as they can onto the front lines, while at the same time not doing long-term harm to their population and then to their economy down the line, hopefully when this horrible war comes to an end. What do you think?
Yeah, there are really no good options for Ukraine in this scenario. They never had any good options from the start, really.
Yeah.
But, yeah, if Russia wants to completely do a war of attrition, through manpower alone, theoretically, as long as they can get equipment from their allies, they will win eventually.
Yeah.
But it's just the issue of troop morale, how well they're trained, possible desertions that they also have to deal with.
Right. Yeah.
which I'm not sure how common they are anymore, but they were. I remember them being like uh, kind of a big problem in like the first year or two of the war, and uh, I think yeah, and also the Russian economy also is like it's had periods of growth and stagnation, but like now it is going into decline,
Right.
and
Yeah.
yeah, we'll see where that goes in the long term. I don't think it'll bounce back as much as it had in like like 2022 and 2023 to 4.
Yeah. I mean, he had a substantial war chest with Putin, I mean, before this war started, but that's kind of starting to run dry. Um, and then I also, there's a person who works at the U.S. Naval War College, Sarah Payne. She made an interesting point, which was the damage done to Russia via Western sanctions. It's not a short-term game with that; it's a long-term game. So their economy is going to be like miles behind because once this war ends, which it eventually has to, whether that be a Russian victory or a negotiated peace, because unfortunately a Ukrainian peace is likely not an option, barring the complete collapse of the Russian state. But their economy is going to have to play catch up first to get to the point where it was before the war started, and then it's going to have to try to ramp up. Whereas all the Western economies in Europe have been constantly evolving. I mean, their economy is kind of screwed in a long term sense. I'm sorry. One last thing, though, before we go, which was I wanted to talk real quick about what could happen in the future once this war ends in terms of Europe. So it's really going to depend on on how really soon the war ends. So Putin, there have been theories that once Putin has kind of dealt with Ukraine in whatever form that may be, whether it's taking the Donbass region and consolidating that, he'll then start to kind of rebuild his army and then possibly look towards other European countries. Nicholas, how likely do you think that could be? Like, do you think that that's something that could happen, or has this kind of possibly made Putin think twice about acting against any NATO EU member?
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, Putin definitely beforehand did not have the confidence to go in against some NATO member or like potential NATO member because, I mean, Putin already knew that he could not beat NATO, even like in the state that it was in like 2022. So, yeah, especially after this war, even if like the gains Russia makes are significant, which they definitely will not be unless just all of Ukraine's allies abandon it. And even then, probably, you know, wouldn't be substantial. Maybe they'll get like the provinces that they like kind of control on the front lines, but other than that, definitely not. So yeah, their population will take a while to recover and may like not recover for the next like I don't know 50 to maybe even 100 years because I mean we saw what happened to Ireland. This isn't exactly like the same extent of it, but Russia has a very low birth rate right now, so it's not looking too good for them on that front. Plus, yeah, their economy is crashing and it's going to keep crashing as long as sanctions are applied, which will probably be for the next, like, I don't know, a couple of years after the war ends, unless, he really makes some concessions, which I doubt he will. And also the state of the military is just not good at all. It'll take a very long time for him to replace his armor losses, his just ammunition, like missiles and like artillery pieces. That's going to take so long that, I mean, Putin might die before Russia has even the slightest chance of declaring war on a NATO member.
Right.
So there's just no way really. Maybe he'll get like some confidence and try to like invade Moldova or something, but that's like as far as I can see really.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, although let's be honest here, that what we're talking about is if he is realistic and sane and doesn't try to make some kind of blitz across the Baltic states with as many troops as he can get his hands on, and try to like force concessions to get the Baltics. But he's a ruthless, evil person. Putin is,
But he's not
but
that dumb.
yeah, but he's not like crazy, stupid, suicidal when it comes to his country. He can recognize the state that his military is in. So it's doubtful that we would see some kind of Russian attack on a NATO member for at least like 10 years or something like that, at least. But, we could be wrong. I mean, who knows what is going through his head, and who knows what the Russian post-war recovery will look like. Maybe they get a lot of money from selling oil to China and India, and maybe that's enough to buy some cheap Iranian and North Korean and Chinese weapons to rebuild their military, and who knows what happens. But yeah, if everything like stays the way it is when it comes to Russia, it would be unlikely that they would attack a NATO member for a significant amount of time. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you for listening. Make sure, like we said at the beginning, to rate the podcast if you like it. Make sure to follow to always be notified whenever a new episode comes out. Make sure to share it with a friend or a family member, or just anyone you see on the street who looks like they'd enjoy listening to the podcast. And we will see you guys next week with our next episode.